There are proofs in the scriptures that the beast, who is the Antichrist, will be a human king that will rise in the end time together with the 10 kings. In Revelation, the Bible also talks about a beast rising out of the bottomless pit. Now, the question is, who is this beast that is coming out of the bottomless pit? If Antichrist is really a human being, you see the one coming out of the bottomless pit. Has any human been to the bottomless pit before? If there is, who are they? And then, if there are none, who is this beast rising out of the bottomless pit, and what is his assignment in the end time? You are welcome to the Diary of Truth. This is Olusheye. Reading from the book of Revelation chapter 17, verse 8. The beast that thou saw was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit, and go into perdition. Chapter 11, verse 7. And when they have finished their testimony, the beast that has sent out of the bottomless pit shall make war against them, and shall overcome them and kill them. These passages that I've read consistently talks about a beast that comes out of the bottomless pit and that goes into perdition. There are three beasts that the Bible speaks about in the book of Revelation. Number one, we have the beast from the sea. And from the last video, I made mention of this as the beast rising from the sea of humanity. And now, another beast is this. Although this third is confusing because it is not specifically separated from the other two, but rather it is seen as being embedded in the first beast, that's the beast from the sea, because in the analysis or in the explanation of the character and the achievements and the assignment of the beast from the sea, we see this beast coming in and then being expressed as the beast from the bottomless pit. If a beast is coming out of the abyss or of the bottomless pit, that beast cannot be seen as human because humans don't occupy abyss. Rather, it is the habitation of fallen angels. I will get there very soon. The Antichrist will be a human being with human characteristics and assignments. Now, if in the same context that is explaining the Antichrist as the beast and the operations of him, and then the kingdom is going to establish, this beast that is coming out of the bottomless pit is now coming out. It is normal to believe that this beast coming out of the bottomless pit is also the Antichrist. But how do we know this beast is different from Antichrist, the first beast? There's what is called the law of double reference. The law of double reference applies to where a visible personality, a visible creature, is addressed, but certain statement from what is being said to this visible person is also going to an invisible person who is using that visible person as a tool. Then in that case, we have the law of double reference. When two persons are involved in the same passage, then we have what is called double referencing. Now, those two persons, one will be visible, the other invisible. From Genesis chapter 3, verse 14. And the Lord said unto the serpent, because thou hast done this, thou hast cursed above all cattle, and above every beast in the field. Upon thy belly shalt thou go, and then dust shalt thou eat all the days of thy lives. And he continues, talking to the serpent in verse 15. I will put an enemy between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed. He shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel. Verse 14 addresses the serpent directly. That's a physical creature. But moving on to verse 15, we know all those things in verse 15 do not apply to the serpent. Rather, it applies to the personality that is working inside or through the serpent. That is a case of double referencing. We also see a similar thing in Ezekiel chapter 28, from verse 2 to verse 17. That passage is a prophecy and it's a warning to the king of Tyros. According to Josephus, this prince of Tyros was Itobalus II. He was so proud that he even claimed to be God. He exalted his heart as the heart of God. And you can see that in that passage. Ezekiel chapter 28, verse 2. Son of man, say unto the prince of Tyrus, thus says the Lord, because thine heart is lifted up, and thou hast said, I am a God. I sit in the seat of God in the midst of the seas. Yet thou art a man and not God, though thou said thy heart as the heart of God. This passage, this verse 2, is addressed to the human prince of Tyrus. He was exalted. He's a human king, exalted himself above God. In fact, he so lifted up himself that he wanted to be seen as God. Etobalos, as a prince of Tyrus, was suitable picture. It's an example of Antichrist, who also will liken himself and and exalt himself and claim to be God himself, according to 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 4. That is what this man was doing. But if you look at further from verse 12 to 19, let me read verse 12. In verse 12, it says, Son of man, take up a lamentation against the king of Tyrus, and say unto him, Thus says the Lord, Thou sealest up the sum full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. That's been addressed to the king of Tyrus. But this time, I want you to notice some things that have been said here in comparison to what was said to the human prince of Tyrus. He said, Thou hast been in Eden, in the garden of God. No human had been to Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone was thy covering. The workmanship of thy tabrets and thy pap were prepared in thee in the day thou was created. This is not applicable to human being. Further, it says, Thou art the anointed cherub that covereth. Remember, he's still addressing the king of Tyrus. But here we can see he's calling the king of Tyrus the anointed cherub that covereth, which means this second part of the of this prophecy, starting from verse 12, is not addressed to human prince of Tyrus. This is addressed to a spiritual prince, a cherub. In fact, it's addressed to Satan. It was Satan that ruled this king of Tyrus in Tobalos 2, according to the passage from verse 12 to 19. We see a description of Lucifer in that place. So in that case, we can see, number one, God promised to humiliate Itobalos, the king of Tyrus, and also address Lucifer. Itobalos, the prince of Tyrus, was later subdued. He was subdued by Nebuchadnezzar, and then later, at the end of the day, by Alexander the Great. So Lucifer will meet his own doom at the end of the millennium, after he has attempted the coup to overthrow the kingdom of Christ, and then he will be taken finally, and his end will be the lake of fire. Now, the point is this. The Bible addressing the physical, the human prince of Tyrus. Just immediately after that, he switched over and then begin to address the supernatural prince or king of Tyrus. That is double referencing. In the New Testament, Matthew 16, 22 and 23 has another law of double referencing. It's the case of Peter and Jesus Christ. Christ has told the disciples that he was going to die, he was going to suffer, and he will be crucified. And Peter began to rebuke him. And Jesus said, Get you behind me, Satan, because you don't support the things that be of God. I'm sure the disciples will be looking around and say, who is he talking to? Because Peter was not Satan, but Christ, he could see in the spiritual realm the devil, the Lucifer, that was speaking through Peter to hinder him from dying for humanity. So that is double referencing. We have Peter, the physical creature, the physical human being, was being addressed, but in the real sense, the address, the statement was going to a spiritual or supernatural being behind the statement of Peter. In the same way, in Mark chapter 5, verse 7 to 16, Jesus addressed the demon-possessed man. But in the real sense, he was addressing the legion in him. So Revelation is not left out in this law of double referencing. And that is why many people are confused when they read some passages in the scriptures. And whenever we are reading the scriptures, we must be able to identify a part of a passage that applies to the earthly visible person and the part that applies to supernatural being. The beast that thou sawest was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit. Now, if you start from verse 1 of this passage, it was talking about the beast that Mystery Babylon, that's a woman wearing purple, was riding. And then the extension of that beast, in the extension, we see this coming up. This beast that comes out of the bottomless pit is another entity, it's another personality, even though it's a demonic or spiritual personality. Revelation chapter 11, verse 7 says that this same personality, this same person, this beast coming out of the bottomless pit will persecute the two witnesses. Because these people, they were to prophesy for 3.5 years. They were to prophesy for 1,260 days. And so when they finish the days of their prophecy and their testimony, the beasts that are sent out of the pit, out of the bottomless pit, will make war with them and will kill them. This is not talking about Antichrist. This is another person. A beast represents three major things. Number one is a kingdom. Number two is the king that is ruling the kingdom. And number three is a personality behind the kingdom. In the case of Daniel, or in the case of Babylon, when Daniel dreamt in Babylon, he saw the prince of Persia hindering Gabriel from bringing solution to him. So that prince of Persia is a prince that is there ruling, manipulating things in the kingdom of Persia. He's the one that determines what goes wrong. Then it went ahead in the same passage to talk about the king of Persia. He said, I will go back and will fight with the king of Persia, with the prince of Persia. And then after I've overcome the prince of Persia, the prince of Greece will come. That means I will overthrow the prince of Persia for the prince of Greece to come. And that was what happened. When Persia's prince was destroyed, was taken away, the prince of Greece, Alexander, was able to, the prince that controlled Alexander was able to come in to overthrow Medo-Persia and then establish the kingdom around all those, all the territories of Medo-Persia. It was that spirit that empowered Alexander. With just 35,000 soldiers against hundreds of thousands of soldiers, with a provision of $75,000 in cash, Alexander the Great was able to fight against and to conquer a kingdom that has about $11 million in cash with hundreds of thousands of soldiers. How possible could that be? Now, that was made possible because a prince was dislodged. The prince of Persia was dislodged. An angel, Angel Gabriel, fought against the prince of Persia so that the prince of Grecia can be empowered. The spiritual controls the physical. And is a prince that will be in charge of this last kingdom, the eighth kingdom, the kingdom of Antichrist. Is a demon, the angelic priest that will be working together with Antichrist. So they are almost inseparable. That is why in the passages that relate to the beast out of the bottomless pit, you can realize that it's almost linked together. Because if the Bible says he was going to kill the two witnesses, he was going to use the instrumentation of the Antichrist to kill. That is why I said the kingdom of Antichrist and Antichrist himself and this beast are inseparable. They are like three in one, working together to fulfill the wish of Satan in the end time. This beast is the fallen angel. Now, there are some passages in the book of Revelation that do not relate to this prince or to this spiritual prince that is coming. For example, in Revelation chapter 17, verse 11, the Bible says, the beast that was and is not, even he is the eighth and is of the seven and going to perdition. Now, people use this to say Antichrist was, and then he died, and then he will come back again. Now, this passage does not relate to the beast, the Antichrist, and does not relate to the beast, the demonic personality, the fallen angel. This passage relates to the kingdom. The eighth and the seventh kingdom is relating eighth and the seventh kingdom to themselves. You say the beast that was and is not, that the kingdom was, but presently is not. When they say it's not, it talks about as at the time John was writing that passage, that kingdom was not in existence. And he is the eighth. That means the beast, the last kingdom, has existed before, and then presently is no longer existing, but will come again in the future. And then look at this. He said, and is of the seven, and go to perdition. In my last video, I've listed all the seven kingdoms that have ruled from Egypt unto the end time, at least unto the 10 kingdoms. So those are the kingdoms that rule in succession. And then until the 10th kingdom is formed, and then over which Antichrist will take over and possess all the territory of all the kingdoms, all the seven kingdoms. So that's why here he's talking about the last kingdom is going to be part of the past seven, and is going to go into perdition within a very short time. And that short time is just 3.5 years. That means this seventh kingdom is going to exist for only about 3.5 years. Because at the middle of the year, of the tribulation, Antichrist will take over the kingdom, this 10th kingdom, and rule over them and overpower all the territories of the former 7 kingdoms that have existed from Egypt to the future king. So this passage relates to a kingdom. And we can even see that in verse 10. He said, that verse 10 already reveals that the 7, out of which the 8 will come out, are kings, kingdoms. They are kings and kingdom. You cannot separate kings from a kingdom. Also, Revelation 13:3 talks about, I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wounds was healed. Sometimes they use this also to apply to Antichrist, the human Antichrist, that Antichrist will have died, will have received sword, and will die, and then will resurrect again, come from the abyss. No, this is also applicable to the kingdom. A kingdom that was, in fact, these two passages, Revelation 17:11 and Revelation 13:3, they are interrelated, they are related. They are referring to the same kingdom that has existed before, but was conquered. And at the time of John the Baptist, even up till now, they have not existed. But in the future time, they will come out. They will come back to life, and then they will rule the world for a very short time. That is what this beast that was and is not and will yet come. It symbolizes that kingdom. The kingdom of Antichrist that was before, that as the Grecian kingdom, and then was terminated by Roman Empire, but will be revived at the end time, because the Antichrist will be the Grecian king. Only 2 scriptures applies to this beast from Abyss. The first one is found in Revelation chapter 11, verse 7, and that reads, when they have finished their testimony, the beast that ascended out of the bottomless pit shall make war against them and shall kill them. So the territories of the old 7 kingdoms that have existed from Egypt to Roman Empire. Everything, every exploit that Antichrist will perform will be done through this power. Apart from that, Satan himself will be empowering the Antichrist to success. Now, also in Revelation chapter 17, verse 8, he said, the beast that thou sawest was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit. Now here we can see this is addressing a supernatural person, a demonic person that will arise, that will come out of the bottomless pit from abyss, and will come to earth to fulfill an assignment. There are 4 different abodes of the spirit. That is, there are different places where that is habitation of spirit. Number 1, Hades or Sheol is the abode of the dead. It is purely human being, the dead human beings that go there, especially the dead that die in sin. This is where they are kept until their final judgment, and then until they are sent to the last place of punishment, which is Gehenna. So Gehenna is a final place of punishment for all, both man, angels, and demons. Now there are 2 lands of fallen angels and demons. Number 1, Tartarus. That's the third of all the habitations of the spirit. You can see that in 2 Peter. 2 Peter chapter 2, in 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 4. God spared not the angels that sinned, but cast them down to hell. That hell means Tartarus, not Sheol. But delivered them into chain of darkness to be reserved unto judgment. So it's a place of temporary imprisonment for fallen angels and demons who have sinned, who have committed sin from the beginning of the earth, and then they are kept there. No man has been to Tartarus before. You can also see Jude chapter 1, verse 6. And the angel which kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation, he has reserved in everlasting chain under darkness unto the judgment of the great day. This is a confirmation to what Peter said in 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 4. He says, these angels, these fallen angels, these demons committed sin. They left their habitation, and now they are kept in darkness, in chain, until they are finally judged at the great white throne. So that is passages about Tartarus. Tartarus is a place of temporal punishment for fallen angels and demons. Abyss, also referred to as the bottomless pit, is a place of reservation for demons and fallen angels that are kept for special assignments. And why did I say that? If you look at Revelation chapter 9, verse 1 to 11, that describes some demonic personality or demonic creatures that like locusts. That this the demonic creature, they have been kept in the bottomless pit or in abyss for only God know when. And it talks about their assignment at the end time to torment unbelievers, to torment the people that we have the mark of the beast upon their head or on their hand, and that torment was to be or is to be for 5 months. That is the assignment. And if you look at that place, it describes them. Yes, they look like a grasshopper, but in their description, you know these are demonic creatures. They look like human also. They have ears like woman. If you read that passage, Revelation chapter 9 from verse 1 to 11, when somebody tries to kill them, they will not die. That means they are not ordinary. They are demonic. So these were kept in the bottomless pit. He said the smoke of the beast, or the smoke of the bottomless pit filled the entire earth or the heaven, and this locust came out of it and filled the entire world and began to torment people. That happens under the fifth trumpet judgment. In chapter 20, verse 1 to 10, that's talking about Satan. Satan will be kept in abyss temporarily. And the reason he's going to be kept there is because God still have assignment for him after the millennium. So he was kept there, or he will be kept there after the Armageddon battle. He'll be kept in the bottomless pit or the abyss, where he will be for 1,000 years, and then he will be loosed again to go and deceive people. That means because he has another assignment, he's also kept there in the bottomless pit. And then he will be brought out again before he goes to his final doom when he planned a failed coup. So we understand that the bottomless pit is a place not for human, it's for fallen angels. There's no record that any human or dead person is there. Where dead humans go is Sheol and Hades, that is called hell. So this place is the abode of the dead humans. But at the end of the day, all the people, because we can see from where I read about in Revelation chapter 20, verse 1 to 10, that Satan, after he's released and he deceived all the people, he will also end up in Gehenna. That's the lake of fire. That lake of fire will be the end. In fact, also, if you read from verse 11 of Revelation chapter 20, 11 to 15, you will realize that all the people that will be in Hades or Sheol will also be transported after the great white throne. They'll be cast into the lake of fire. That is where the final destination of all wicked humans and angels and demons will be. All will be gathered at the end of the day after judgment. They will all end up in Gehenna, the lake of fire. Now we see that the beast coming out of the bottomless pit or out of abyss cannot be a human being. It's a demonic personality that has been kept there for a purpose, and he will be loosed at the end of the day and be brought to the world to establish the kingdom that he once controlled, that's Grecian kingdom. He will come and influence a move that will bring up the Antichrist to establish or revive Grecian empire. And then over this territory, the Antichrist will rise at the middle of the tribulation period. So, and that kingdom that will be formed at the middle of the tribulation period will be a Greece or reviver of Grecian empire that will be the handwork of this demonic power or demonic prince that was conquered years ago, whose kingdom received deadly blow and then died temporarily, only to be revived at the end time when this prince of Grecia is released and then producing or entering, operating through the Antichrist, the king of the north, to establish a kingdom. But eventually, the God of heaven will bring in judgment upon that throne and upon the kingdom. In the next video, I'm going to be talking about the correlation between the beast from the sea and the beast from the bottomless pit. And we are knowing these things. If you are still playing religion, please do yourself good to surrender to the Lord. Subscribe to this channel, like it, and share. And as you do, the Lord bless you.